Good. Thanks again for everybody coming out today. And again, I just want to reiterate how important it is that I keep in mind and certainly communicate to you how much I appreciate all the work that you all do. You know, it wasn't just something I said yesterday, it's something I believe. I don't see how this program could ever get off the ground and do what it has been able to do over this last 50-some years without you. So it's really important for me to keep in mind and for you to hear from OPM how much we appreciate the work that you all do. We have a lot of heavy lifting going forward, but I still think that without you all even in that space, this is not really possible. So again, thank you all for all the work that you've done to help us raise so much money. So yesterday I had a special request that somebody wanted to see somebody else's face other than mine. That is from me. So I just wanted to share a couple of recent photos of Kayla. And so just a quick story. True story. So I didn't want it, the pictures that I showed you in the past were like iPhone photos, grainy, all that stuff. She doesn't like that. So the only thing that she would allow me to show you were professional pictures, okay? So true story, I take pictures of her all the time with my iPhone, catch her in these crazy moments, but she now understands there's a delete button. And so she wants to see the photo that I took, and she will delete it in a heartbeat. So you're only going to see the good stuff. So as I said before, no more baby pictures. She's, she runs the show. So that's my moment. That's what makes me run home every day. And believe it or not, as I said at the outset of the 50th Commission, the first hearing we had back in September of 2011, I believe it was. I'm forgetting years now. We are trying to set our sights on building a program that is an on-ramp for people in her generation. And as much as we promote and have enjoyed the success of this program the way it is, these kids don't get it. She already knows my passcode for all my devices, okay? So there's nothing that she is gonna wanna see in paper form. There is nothing that she is going to want to see that she can't augment. There's nothing that she is going to be exposed to that she doesn't understand what's in it for her. And I'm not even talking millennials. I'm just talking about the world that I see today now and how much I'm transformed by my new role as a father. And so when I think about where we're going, I'm not always thinking about how it is right now. I'm thinking about if we're gonna build a highway, is it a super highway or is it a 2-lane road? We wanna build it so that we have as much capacity as we possibly can so that the future generations, that when JFK sat in this ballroom and gave his speeches, long time ago, that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to build something for the next great society. And so I feel that this OPM director, Archuleta, John Barry, that's what they're trying to do when they start looking at the needs of the community are going to be great. And we need to make sure that we enlist all of the people, even to her generation, and how we're going to get that done. So having said that, let's cue up the presentation. Well, while that's coming up, again, I just wanted to give a little background on the history of the CFC. And These regulations are sort of an an augmentation of what was originally set up even as far back as the 50s. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about historical perspective of the CFC rules. And it even goes back before the 50s because during the Great Depression, FDR, in order to get things done, developed relationships with private, public firms, and charitable organizations in order to satisfy the needs at that time. You know, unemployment was through the roof, nobody was working, there were great social ills, and even back then FDR realizing that he needed to partner with charitable organizations in order to make sure that this country could get back on its feet. And so, as you can see, most of our data starts in the 60s, but the executive order that started the CFC as we know today in the 60s was actually preceded by Truman and Eisenhower back in the 50s, because there were always very philanthropic federal employees who wanted to do good. And so there were always charities coming and visiting folks in the agencies. They were soliciting federal employees. And so the commission that Eisenhower developed, the advisory committee, was to study how we could do it better, even back then. And fast forward to now, we're still trying to figure out how to do it better. So when you look at this chart, essentially what you're seeing is the growth and contributions given the CFC paradigm starting in the 60s, and you see continued growth probably till around, I think it was 1990, and then you had a little bit of a decline, and then you had a continued growth in pledged dollars until about 2009, where it peaked at $282 million contributed. And the only difference in those two lines is the blue line is what we call nominal value, which is what we count. The red line, which shows sort of essentially the purchasing power based on other economic indicators at that time. So you see now that we pretty much are getting dollar for dollar purchasing power based on the money that's coming in for charities to the community. The participation history is a little different. So we saw the continued growth in what was being contributed to the CFC over time. But what you see here is the decline in participation, or you can reclassify that as interest in the CFC. Because if people are interested in the CFC and they know about it and they're not giving, then there's a reason. We don't always know what that reason is, but we're just tracking it. We've been tracking it for a long time. So the blue line and the red line indicates participation rates among solicited employees, while the blue line reflects the participation rate amongst all employees. So early on, when the CFC was started, it was only started in a handful of cities. And so almost like the map that I showed now, and I'll get to that in a little bit, all federal employees didn't participate in the CFC. All people didn't even know about the CFC. And so what you saw in between, the gap between those lines, the red and the blue line, is that of the people who were solicited in those early campaign years, and there are only about 33 campaigns that covered a small fraction of the country, about 80% of those people participated. So you have participation rates on a small population. As more and more people know about or were informed about the CFC program, you saw that rate start to go down. Okay, so it's a little interesting chart. So the word is getting out slowly, sort of like Lewis and Clark going across the country, right? Discovering things, people finally knowing about it. But once they finally knew about it and what it was, you start to see those lines come together. So the blue line is actually a better show of what the participation has been in the country. So fast forward to 2010. I know I talked a lot about 2010 yesterday, feels like last year. there were a couple articles that came out as soon as I took over this job as director. And articles being the Federal Times. Federal Times at that time were really tracking how well the CFC program was doing for whatever reason. And so at that time, we were really tracking pretty well. But there was an article that came out that said OPM should do a better job at making this program more efficient. And I had been on the job maybe 8 or 9 months. I get a autographed copy of the article from JB, who more affectionately known as Director John Barry, and he says, "Keith, I think you need to read this article." Of course, I quickly picked it up because he only gave me part of it. And essentially what it said was that although the CFC program has done a lot of good, it can do a lot better job of managing limited resources. The costs are too high. There are too many zones and therefore inefficient. It should also do a better job of getting control over its audits. And at that time, I think there were a couple audits out there that were pretty high profile that the IG was doing. I think GAO had done one. And so it said we needed to do a better job. And so Director Barry said, "I need some of your ideas. What do you think? Let's come up with some things and come meet me in my office." So I did. Talked to my staff at the time. We came up with a handful of things that we could do to improve. He looked at him and said, "This is good, Keith, but it's not good enough. This is what I need you to do. I need you to go out to industry. I need you to get some experts. I need you to get their opinions, and I need you to find out exactly what we should do. And then I need you to write a report. And then when you finish writing that report, I think you need to write some new regulations. After you finish writing the new regulations, you need to implement it that quickly." So that was November of 2010. The next training that we had in New Orleans was 4 or 5 months later. Director Barry said, "I'm coming to that training. And everything that I just told you, I'm going to tell them in public." And then, of course, you know the rest of the story. My wife's 8.5 months pregnant. So I'm like, "Appreciate that, John. Don't know how I'm going to pull this off, but yes, sir." 6 months later, that commission was stood up. And a lot of you participated in that commission. And so therefore, you all know we had hours and hours of discussion and debate. Within a year, I learned more about CFC than, well, I'll put it this way. The folks that were on a commission combined probably had about 200 years of experience in the CFC. I got 200 years of experience in the CFC in 6 months in terms of what it is, what it's not, who's participating, who's not, where it should go, why it shouldn't go there, how many zones we should have, no zones, mergers, everything. From all the payroll office issues to audit issues, got a crash course. And so it was a collective body of people who came up with the ideas about what we should do. And not only that, Director Barry made sure that we had a bipartisan leadership committee to head it up. So we had a Democrat, former member of Congress, we had a Republican, former member of Congress. A lot of you know this story, some of you don't, because I see a lot of blue badges out there. So I'll wrap this up quickly. Essentially, we had folks from agencies, we had federations, we had charitable organizations, we had GAO, we had OIG, we had everybody that we could possibly get in a room and actually have real conversations. When you got 28 people in a room, it's pretty hard to have real conversations, but we did it. Thousands of hours of clocked conversations about what we should do, where we should go. And at the end of it, we had 4 meetings. They were all public. And we issued a report in 2012. Now again, remember this started from an article in 2010. I still had my day job. We were still reviewing applications. We were still coding charities. We were still doing audit reviews. We were still doing everything. This was in the background. and I wasn't getting any sleep. I had a 1-year-old. Okay? So fast forward to where we are now. So the rules got written in draft form. We entertained about 1,400 public comments, including interagency comments through OMB. We evaluated those, wrapped those into the new set of regulations that were finally published in April of 2014. And everybody else that I talked to was writing rules back then. The first Obama administration was saying there's no way in heck you're going to get anything out of OMB in under a year. We did it in months. The comptroller at OMB at that time was Danny Warfel. Some of you may remember him because he was asked to take over the IRS after there was a few charitable crises over there. He made sure we got it done. The folks who were on the co-chairing the commission, Tom Davis and Bev Byron. Bev Byron used to be on the base realignment commission. So she understood how to do realignments. And so she helped us shepherd these things through. Again, April 2014, we issued the final rules. And so now here we are. 2015, everything pretty much looks the same. Right now, the relationships amongst OPM and the LFCC is essentially the same. OPM's responsibility is the same. We're still reviewing national and international charity applications. We're still doing compliance work, charity registry, managing all that, and the basic customer service that we do. The relationship right now between the LFCC for 2015 will be the same. LFCC right now is responsible for managing the local application reviews and also standing up the MOUs with the PCFOs, making sure that there's resources available for marketing events and other events that go on. And those, again, just general categories. I know you all do much more. For 2016, the roles are essentially the same for OPM. The big difference is the functions of the PCFO. The functions of the PCFO are split. And again, this is a recommendation of the commission to centralize the cash receipts and disbursement functions and develop a function that primarily is responsible with focusing on outreach. Now, I don't know how the dollars and the time, the level of effort always split amongst all the campaigns, but we have been trying to collect data to find out kind of how that works. So not every campaign area is created equal. However, we do understand that there's a lot of time that goes into processing pledges, counting money, making sure it gets dispersed into the right area. The commission felt that process was being duplicated at least 150 times. And we'd probably be a little bit more efficient if we weren't doing it 150 times. We didn't know how many times it should be done, but we knew it was something less than 150. And so we believe that we could save the donors some money. We could save the payroll offices that are actually doing the allotments some money. We could probably save the charities a little legwork if they weren't getting disbursements from 150 dispersing areas. And so OPM said, okay, fine. We will take on the responsibility of the cash receipts and disbursement part. And we called it CCA. So the CCA will be managed by OPM. We have decided that we will allow up to 5 CCAs to handle the burden of the cash flow. We haven't decided how many we will award yet. So although the cash receipts and disbursement is still extremely important in this part, we believe that the commission recommendations to separate that function and centralize it would be more efficient, and we could have a little bit more accountability. One of the reasons why we said that it might work to have 5 is right now, back in 2002, the government consolidated 26 federal agencies' payroll offices into 5 shared service providers. And so it made sense that we might have at least one CCA for each shared service provider because they manage a portfolio of agency employee contributions. So OMB really liked that because OMB is really about efficiency, especially if it already aligns with programs that they have supported, which was the consolidation of the payroll offices. Probably a lot more information than you know, but for the payroll services that don't have to deal with 150 dispersing centers, it's a godsend for them. So that's what OPM will be picking up. The LFCC, on the other hand, will also still be responsible primarily for its functions. One of the things that the CCA will do, however, is one of them will build an online system or has the requirements to build an online system for charity applications. It will also build a tool that allows for one e-giving system as opposed to the 90 websites that we have now. Is it 90? 100? It will consolidate that, so the employee experience will be singular and will be consistent. The other piece that the online charity application will relieve the LFCC of immediately having to handle all of those applications. The online system, as the requirements are saying, will allow us to process front end to make sure all those documents that are required for an application are accepted at that point. So the LFCC won't have to do that initially. And so since those main functions, the online, the application, the online giving, the application, and the cash receipts and disbursement office is now coming essentially through OPM, that leaves the LFCC with essentially the local governance and operations of the marketing and being able to make sure that the outreach in their area is consistent. So I said a lot, but essentially the roles are still very similar in the new paradigm. However, the responsibility that OPM will take on is greater in the hopes that it reduces the responsibility at the local level. I showed this map yesterday. It's the same map I showed Director Archuleta when she was going for her confirmation hearing. She winced. She didn't understand it. I think she thought it was something from Burberry or something, it plaid all over it. So she said, what does this mean? And I said, well, this is basically how the map is currently laid out. Now, this is 15 maps, so it was even, didn't have all the mergers that we've instituted over the last year. But she says, how do you manage this? I said, I don't. The LFCCs do. She's like, how do they have the time to manage this? This is a good question. She said, I think, you probably need to simplify this. I said, well, your predecessor said the same thing. I said, but we wanted to make sure we had the rules in place so we knew how everything would be impacted before we started making large-scale changes like that. She said, well, you need to do it. That was in 2013. Last summer, 2014, she asked me, is that done yet? I said, well, man, we just got the rules out, and so we're meeting with federations and charities and PCFOs to explain them since I couldn't talk about them during the rulemaking process. She's like, okay, well, that's cool. You need to invite me to one of those meetings. So she sat in one of the meetings with the federations where we explained what we believe the impact of the rules would be. So after that meeting, she said, well, how'd that go? I said, well, you were there, so I think it went pretty well, but, at the same time, I can give you my feedback. So she said, good, give me a report. So I met back with her and she said, okay, so how's that map coming? I said, well, we're doing some business requirements. We're building out some other pieces on that. She says, okay, I need that by November. So we approached her with that proposed new geography. And so during that time, we didn't want to just propose something. We wanted to be based on something. So for the last 2 years, we've been bugging all of you for a lot of data. I know Marcus has been on the phone with you. He's been asking, where's your stuff? And fortunately for us, you've been very responsive. And so we've been looking at and developing a model, a data model, that provides us as much transparency into all the costs that are associated with the CFC. Marketing costs, cost per donor, cost per solicited donor, travel miles, salaries, everything, you name it, just so that we had some basis to start looking at what a new map would look like if we were to propose something. And so this is what we came up with. And since then, we issued this. We have been on the phone with probably 1,000 of you just trying to explain the rationale and take your questions about what this means, what doesn't it mean, so forth and so on. And we've got some very good feedback. So this table is just kind of what I just said. It's just, but it outlines it from 2015 and 2016 perspective. Essentially, reviewing the local charity applications is the same. Let me pull this map up because I can't really see it over. Ooh, can't read that either. I need the big one. Again, the PCFO is selected by the LFCC. Currently, they will select the OC, which is the outreach coordinator. OPM will manage the CCA, which is a cash receipts and disbursement. The review of the local charity applications, again, will be done in 2016 by the LFCC and the way we propose it, but it'll be using the online system. They'll still be responsible for maintaining the governance structure and the LFCC chair and the co-chair. They won't adjudicate local charity appeals. There won't be any at the local level. You'll still review marketing materials, determine recognition. No more audits. No more auditors poking around. And we want to come up with an online training tool for LFCCs. Again, that's not to say that we won't meet or won't need to meet, but we need to come up with a way so that you don't have to come out of pocket to travel if it's not necessary. And this is kind of, again, a narrative of much of the same that I mentioned. So let me just, during our calls, we got some FAQs that we wanted to just kind of highlight. Which LFCC is responsible for the audit of the 2014 campaign period? Members of the current LFCC will remain responsible for the audits of the 2014 and 15 campaign, which is our due to OPM in September 2016 and 2017. So kind of the same cycle that we have right now. How do LFCCs negotiate changes to the boundaries? all the counties must be covered that are in the zones that we currently have proposed. The LFCCs may enter into discussions about how they want to exchange counties or note that changes will impact the budget. We're still working on the budget. We do have some budget data. And again, we can talk a little bit more about that in the LFCC breakout, you know, how we have started to construct that. But there could be changes if counties are swapped out. What is the process by which the consolidated LFCCs develop bylaws and select chairs, et cetera? Each LFCC can set up its own procedures, which is kind of how it is right now. We have, you know, provided what we believe are some sort of boilerplate bylaws or things that should be considered. But, you know, we want to make sure that you have the flexibility to do what makes sense in your area. Can the LFCC develop its own rules? Well, I mean, operating rules, sure, as long as they're consistent with the regulations that OPM has, which is, again, kind of the same thing right now. I can't see it. Huh? Can LFCCs still use loaned executives? Yeah, so independent of the CFC rules, I think President Nixon, is there a slide on that? Yeah. President Nixon established the loan executive program in 1971. We have not gone and changed that executive order, so it's not been superseded by anything. So the loan executive program was designed to help facilitate the operations of the CFC, but are not governed by the CFC executive order nor regulation. So that always has been the case. So, there's no question that we still can use loan executives. It's just what would you use them for, given the way that the work could be reallocated with respect to the LFCC responsibility. Does that make sense? No? Okay, I see some shaking heads. Executive order, not superseded. The loaned executive program still exists, always existed since '71, not part of the CFC executive order, nor part of the CFC rules. Don't need to be. What do you have a question?
Well, yeah, we were thinking that there wouldn't be many recognition items after we went through the transition, and on the chart you still showed it, and I'm assuming that that's where the LEs would come in. We still need to have that contact back and forth, and I'm still concerned about the post office going paperless. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, what is a zone?
It is a area that is where the campaign is administered that's bordered by another zone.
It's synonymous with campaign.
You have to press the button.
It's synonymous with campaign. It's just another term. So we don't have separate campaigns doing separate things. We're all doing the same thing within a different zone.
But there's still borders, so. So what are your next question about postal service? I didn't understand.
Well, we talk about the new generation coming on, and I understand that. My kids both have very smart phones. I still have a dummy phone. But as we move forward, the post office still has many employees that do not have access to a computer.
Right.
Do not sit in front of a screen like I do all day and find out what I'm doing. So that's one of our concerns, is because that's still our largest contributor, is the Postal Service.
Sure.
I've taken the tour of the GMA facility, whatever they call it, where it looks industrial to me. I've worked in industry before, and this is not what I look at in most federal offices. It's large machinery, somebody sitting there, you know, using the computer on the machine, but not having any access to internet, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, we got several comments about that during the public comment period, which is why we said that we would keep paper pledges around for, I think, 5 years. And then there's a look-back provision in the rules that says we are to evaluate the effects of the rules during this period, and so we will also make adjustments if we need to as we get closer to that period.
Well, again, this was in context with the LEs. I just want to make that clear, that it wasn't,
Oh, I see.
that's
You're
where
joining
the
the two
LEs will come
issues.
into play, because we'll still have paper pledges,
Gotcha.
we'll still have recognition items. Sounds
Right.
very familiar from what
Oh,
we're
so it
doing
was a
now.
statement, not a question?
Yeah. The
Okay.
other thing is that we've not been having many LEs lately. The Postal Service has pulled back because of their financial problems. The base is also, our base has shrunk dramatically, and so they've pulled back too. We're having a real hard time getting LEs. Thank you.
Yeah, if you go back and look at that article that Director Berry sent to my office and read down to about halfway through, it talks about the Postal Service and the actual boundaries, and that the Postal Service has been, over time, less able to offer up help. And so that was another reason why in the article it said that OPM should reconsider in expanding the boundaries so we can include other agencies into them. Next.
Hi, Molly Dysart with the Central Oklahoma CFC. Kind of back to the org chart, what is the relationship between the OC working with the LEs and the charities? Will our loaned executives be able to facilitate having charities come out and speak still, or is that going to be nixed because that's a special event?
No, that's true, and Marcus will cover that, but yeah,
Okay.
they still will be able to coordinate.
Okay.
Good morning.
Hey.
Lisa Makazuski, Eastern Pennsylvania and South Jersey CFC. And I just want to make sure I understood. I understand we're still allowed to use loaned executives, which is good. But did I understand from your statement that the outreach coordinator would not necessarily have to use LEs, and that those responsibilities to go out to the organizations that are a part of our campaign would then fall as part of the agreement for the outreach coordinator to work without the LEs?
Well, it's really going to be up to each LFCC area how you want to use them. And again, Marcus is going to go through just OC in the next segment. So he may be able to better answer that question, but it's really going to be up to the LFCCs on what they want in their campaigns, whether they want them to do marketing or whatever events that you want to have, educational events, bringing the charities into the agencies, will really be up to you and how much. So to the degree that you want a lot of that and you need loaned executives to help facilitate that, then yeah, that's how you might want to utilize them.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick McGuire, Independent Charities. Keith, you mentioned that that the LFCCs will not handle local level appeals. Does that mean there are no local level appeals, or that OPM is going to handle them, or some other way?
Yeah, they'll come through OPM.
Say that
There
again?
will be local appeals. They'll come through OPM.
And who will do them?
We will.
Got it.
Just for clarity, thank you so much for everything. So the CCA will alert all the current charities about the application process and the online application process?
Right.
Okay. And then the OCs will make an announcement as well to educate new charities about the application process?
You want to take that? That's part of your OC.
Yeah, we're having,
More
this
to come.
afternoon, we'll go over the charity process.
The other question is, so when the CCA, well, who are the charities when they're applying online? Say they have questions, will they contact the CCA?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there won't be any really charities contacting the OCs regarding the application
Correct.
process. And then whenever the CCA program, it closes, say whatever, April 1st, charities have to be in. Well, then they send a list, CCA send a list to the LFCC saying these ones look good, these ones look like they have problems? Or do the LFCC, will they actually have to log into a program and review each local?
You're stealing my song and dance this afternoon.
I'm sorry, okay.
So,
No,
so
but
hold
good,
tight.
good questions, but we did try to do it in bite size because we understand that this is a lot of information, so we have most of the day to dedicate to it. But good question.
Good morning, Mary Streets, Newport News, Virginia. I've noticed some people trying to take pictures of these slides, and I myself have to go back to my LFCC and to my boss and explain everything. It's a lot to absorb.
Yeah.
I wondered if we could receive these
Yes.
slides with your answers to the questions inserted, so we don't have to try and remember everything and
We'll
then
do-
maybe get some
yeah.
details wrong.
We'll do our best to make it as easy as possible, give you the slides and the FAQ.
Just as I see so many people coming up, and as we know, if your question is not related to the stuff that Keith just was talking about, please know we have a whole day and we're hitting on the other topics. And we're trying to limit this question period to just the LFCC questions. So if it's related to OC, if it's related to CCA, if it's related to something else, we're hitting those topics later. And if you could hold your questions on those until that session.
Don't forget them, though.
Oh, no. Good morning, Tamara from the Greater Olympic Peninsula, CFC. And when you were talking about the audits for 2014, 2015 campaigns, when there's not going to be a PCFO to help facilitate that with the LFCCs, how will the LFCCs manage those audits since there's no longer that framework to work within?
Yeah, there's currently an agreement and a fiscal responsibility for the periods that those funds are going to come in. And since most funds come in through allotments, we understand that there's going to be trailing activity. And so the PCFO will still be responsible for that trailing activity, or what we call run out. So that's how that will work.
Well, the reimbursement piece happens to be the budget that you have already given that should cover the cost of the budget. Any budget that you've given for this 2015 campaign is required, and there are about 10 memos out there about this. It is required to cover the cost of the audit for the 2015 campaign that will take place in 2017. It's also required to cover all the costs, and this has always been the case, that your budget is supposed to cover the cost of your entire campaign from the day, and it's in the audit guide. If you read the audit guide, it says from the day that the PCFO is selected, and for this year's audit guide that's going to audit the 2013 campaign, that would have been March 2013 until the last distribution is made for the 2013 campaign, which is going up. Last distributions are being made right now. So the audit
Mary's
you're paying for.
correct in that we're going to cover that in transition too, but that is a good question. So the short answer is, if you haven't budgeted for that already, you probably need to adjust your budget.
Hey, good morning. Rick Roble from San Antonio, CFC.
How you doing?
With respect to the CCAs, currently PCFO duties during the campaign also includes the campaign management, keeping the LFCC, and in our case, all the commanders and directors apprised of a weekly status update, how their actual campaigns are going by dollar amount, participation, et cetera. For the CCAs, whether you have 1 or 5, whether they're divvied up by pay center, regional, whatever, what are the responsibilities of the CCA to the LFCCs so that they are aware of how their individual campaigns down to the unit level is going? Because right now, so we can provide it because all the information comes to us, and it's not based on whether it was from DFAS or EEX or something else. So if you have different CCAs doing those functions compartmentalized, how are those responsibilities to get the information back to the LFCCs?
So essentially, what your PCFO may be doing, again, I don't know them specifically, they're taking data from the current e-giving systems or pledge data, the manual pledge data, right? Either EEX,
Both.
MyPay, and whatever comes in on pledge
Right,
cards.
whether it's MyPay, EX, pledges.
Right.
Well,
Well, right.
every day we at least have a current accounting that we have that information
Right,
available.
so the functionality that's in theirs is going to be a requirement of the CCA. So in other words, whatever EEX could do or what MyPay could do, we're asking the CCA to be able to do as well. And so that information should be there. The pledge processing, they'll also do, the paper pledges. So all that information should be there, so they should be able to provide you what's essentially what you're getting now.
Okay, and a follow-up question also is with respect to the paper pledges, who pays the cost to mail pledges with currently cash check or payroll deduction to a other than local organization? Where does that cost come from?
It's a donor, right?
And Keith, that's my question too for
Okay,
Renee
so
in
we got
Atlanta.
the same question.
Yeah, my question is, who will be responsible for getting, since paper and cash is grandfathered for 5 years, whose responsibility is it to get those paper pledges and cash to the CCA? And what format will we do that? Is that the LFCC, the OC, or how do we do that? Do we set up a local account? What do we do, and how do we reconcile that?
Okay. So cash is not grandfathered. Cash is gone. Cash is out day one, no 5 years, no nothing. Paper pledges, not only one-time gifts, but payroll deduction, are sent directly to the CCA. The method by which is certainly still being decided, but most recently, that would be on the donor's dime. That could still be, whoa, freak out. That's still being decided, as I said, but, oh, really? Whatever. Okay, and then the next part of the question, dealing with, I've already forgotten. Was there
What was
more
it?
to
Was there a second part to that? We said cash and pledge cards. I think. Yeah, so if there was a check with that pledge card, then that would also be mailed into the CCA.
Yes, yeah, that would be mailed in. The underlying point here also is that under no circumstances is an outreach coordinator to touch, handle, look at, think about money or pledges. It is outside their purview, and I will be going over that shortly because that's about OCs. We're talking about LFCCs now.
And same goes with LEs and key workers. They are not to touch pledges, money, or anything like that.
Paper pledges are sent directly to the CCA by the donor.
Just, we got two more people at the mic. Out of respect, if you don't mind, we'd like to get to them.
All right, you ready? Okay, Marilyn Wilson, Western New York CFC. Can you just clarify a little this LFCC role? Now, right now we've got several LFCCs within our new boundaries. Are each of them still going to have their own LFCC?
The boundary is the boundary.
So there's
there-
only one?
Yeah. So we're going to dive a little deeper into that in the LFCC breakout.
Okay.
Are you an LFCC or PCFO?
No, PCFO, so how am I
Oh.
going to find out the information that you're going to give to LFCCs?
Well, essentially right now, I'll state it this way. In the calls that we had with the federal employees who are the governance structure of the LFCCs, we laid out the boundaries and then gave them the wiggle room to try to decide how they wanted to staff the LFCC in their zones. And so there's a little bit of a runway between now and when this all has to be done. And so there's different approaches, I'll be honest with you, that people are taking in terms of how to do that. So the LFCCs are making that determination now. Some of them have set up transformation subcommittees. They've evaluated who wants to be on, maybe who wants to retire, who is retiring. So a lot of those discussions are going on. So I don't have a pat answer for that.
So, but it does sound like it'll come down to whatever region it is, it'll be one LFCC.
There'll be one governance structure, and then they will determine how that structure will operate, whether it's subcommittee or something else.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jamie King. I'm with the Greater Chattanooga area, and I just wanted to share my concern and our concern with the removal of cash as an option. We are very blessed to have a very active LFCC, very active federal agencies in our area, and especially just considering combining us with others in the state of Tennessee. We raised, just in our campaign alone, over $200,000 in fundraising activities. So that's just a huge, it hurts our campaign significantly, and it hurts our charities that are going to be receiving from those funds. I mean, if we combine those with the Chattanooga area, Smoky Mountain, Nashville, you're looking at over $500,000
Yeah.
that we're taking away from these charities. So I just want to share that huge concern. And also, we've got transmission linemen out, and those guys are not getting to computers. I'm all new age, and usually I don't even have paper. But we're just really hurting the campaign. So I just want us to take that under consideration as we move forward.
I appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate that, and we got a lot of public comments, and hopefully we tried to address it in the public comment period. But you know, like I said before, the rules that we have now go into effect in 2016. There's a look back provision. We will be delving into the details of what happened, what were the unintended consequences, what were the consequences, what were the outcomes of the changes that we made. So we will be evaluating those and the impact on the charities.
So my question is, you've got 40 zones, 3 LFCC members per zone, correct?
The minimum.
Minimum. But what if you don't get any volunteers to sit on an LFCC in a zone? What's your contingency plan?
That's a good question. Right now, I have not had any conversations with any LFCZ proposed zone areas whose heart is not in this campaign. And the fact of the real matter is that all LFCCs right now are stretched because of their either collateral duties on their job, the work that they have to do. And so, in fact, I see the other way. They're looking for relief. And so it makes sense that we would involve more agencies in the mix for them to pick from so that they don't have the burden of always being the LFCC chair. We have some chairs that have been chairs for a decade. And so they are actually looking for some new blood, so to speak, or some new ideas on how to manage this process. So I hear what you're saying, but I just, from the standpoint of how much outreach we have done, the conversations, and again, we'll have a breakout session with LFCCs and we can hear more of their challenges. This whole idea is to sort of reduce the work. You know, I don't look at geography as work necessarily, but I do understand how there could be some corollary there. We have almost 50,000 applications come in when we had statewide and adjacency for 23,000 charities. So we had double the number of applications for the number of charities that get in. We're going to reduce the number of applications and therefore level of effort just in screening alone. And so that's the paradigm that we're looking at with respect to the changes just on the application side, let alone the audits and the other requirements.
Yes, Howard Reichman, Miami VA LFCC. I would like to look at the issue of cash. We were talking at the micro level, but at your level, at the macro level, the national level, you gave a number, I believe, yesterday of 7% was in cash.
Roughly.
So if you look at that number by the entire take, you're somewhere around $20 million is coming in cash. Is that approximate at the highest contribution level?
So, yeah, so the number included cash and checks. I didn't, yeah.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, if you're going to eliminate that, that's going to be a huge nationwide impact. So I'm sure you've discussed that, and so you're planning for a dip, and then hopefully a swing up. Is that the way you're looking at it?
Well, you can look at it a couple different ways. You're right. From the macro level, we're talking cash and checks. So not all hard currency makes up the 7%. So let's just say it's 50% of the 7%. It's 3.5% is actually hard currency. There is a substantial amount of risk. Forget the risk of incorrect acceptance, okay? Let's forget the fact that we could be letting in charities that are not bona fide charities. We talked about that yesterday. That's what I call the risk of incorrect acceptance. There's also the risk of handling currency in the workplace. I don't know how many times I've gotten calls that bags of cash have gotten lost. Directly to me, that I've had to resolve. I don't know how many times I've gotten calls, even from payroll offices, that are sending money to the wrong campaign, and I've had to fix. And I've had to go to OMB and get improper payment statements done. I don't know how many times I've had someone who was managing a golf tournament as an event that suddenly got detailed out of that job. Someone else took it over, went out to the putting greens and set up the golf tournament, and they said, wow, you gave us a big discount this year. Well, no, this is the same rate I was giving Bob when he was managing it for 10 years. There's a lot of risk that is not obvious or not known, I'll put it that way, that I see, unfortunately, and have to resolve on a regular basis. And so we did take those comments into account. We did look at the optics and what could be lost. We also looked at the responsibility and the liability on federal employees who are responsible for managing the program and said, how can we reduce that risk somewhat? So that's kind of what I'm seeing at the 50,000 foot level. Just a couple more questions and I think we're out of time.
Darcy Kendall, LFCC in Greater Wisconsin, and as the agency coordinator for about 14,000 postal employees, I would like you to reconsider that maybe allowing checks donations would not be handling cash. Also, as far as the security goes, I've never had an issue with our monies getting lost. We have processes in place to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Great.
But we've, in the past year, had quite a few of our government agencies been hacked into, and vital information has been gotten.
Right.
And now you're talking about having all agencies feed into one website,
Right.
and it's going to be social security numbers and possibly bank accounts. That I want you to reconsider that.
Well, I appreciate that point. You're right. There's always risk, you know, whether it's cash or online. Certainly guys are getting more sophisticated, and ladies, at hacking in the systems. And so we need to be mindful of the security protocols that we establish for that. As far as I know, this will all be working with the shared service providers, and so that HR data will remain there. So as far as I understand that, and I think the whole country is struggling with it, whether you're IBM or Target or, you know, I get what you're saying. So we're mindful that we need to make sure that we have systems in place to deal with that. She's in the LSC section now. This is the last question.
I'm Cynthia Wallace. I'm from Metropolitan Jackson area, CFC. Okay. Okay.
Hi, Cynthia.
This is my concern. We haven't had loan executives in Jackson, Mississippi in the last 10 years. I mean, just getting a key worker is like pulling teeth. Is there something that's going to go out from the bottom up, top down, sideways? I don't care how it goes, to let the agencies know that, hey, you guys need to actively participate in this in terms of loan executives. The other thing is, in terms of LFCC membership, you're basically looking at the work crew, there's 3 over here that deals with that whole area, and we bring in a pretty good amount of money. And trying to get the agencies to even show up at anything in our area is, I mean, you're gonna hear crickets. I'm gonna tell you that right now. So my thing is, if you're gonna implement all these things in areas like mine, these agencies need to step on the boat and do what needs to be done instead of me trying to drag somebody into, you know, into play. Because we go to an agency and talk about CFC, oh, I've never heard of it. You never heard of, or they say, oh, I decided not to do this year. You can't decide not to do this year. Everybody has the right to find out about CFC. So my biggest thing is, you guys or somebody needs to have a plan to let everybody know from all levels that this is a program and everybody needs to know about it.
Appreciate that.